like to call to order the January 10th, 2023 committee meeting of the Milton Area School District. We have
Mr. Frederick.
Here.
Mr. Hosterman.
Here.
Mr. Hunt.
Here.
Ms. Kessler.
Here.
Mr. Moser.
Mr. Moser is unable to make it this evening.
Dr. Strasser.
Here.
Mr. Harris.
Here.
Dr. Weaver.
Here.
Mrs. Rance.
Here. Our student of the month is unable to make it this evening, not feeling well. So would you please all stand and join together in the pledge to the flag? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Get to her. Yeah. Leave that. All right, are there any comments from visitors this evening? Mr. Fink?
I have not received any at this time.
Wayne, do you have anything online, any comments? All right, well, we'll start our discussion this evening under Executive Committee. First of all, we do have one action that we have to take. We do need to formally approve our committee assignments. I'd like to make a motion to recommend approval of the 2023 committee assignments that are attached.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Are there any questions? Could we have roll call, please?
Mr. Frederick.
Yes.
Mr. Hosterman.
Yes.
Mr. Hunt.
Yes.
Ms. Kessler.
Yes.
Dr. Strasser.
Yes.
Mr. Harris.
Yes.
Dr. Weaver.
Yes.
Mrs. Rance.
Yes. Thank you. Going to have our mid-year review of district goals for the 2022-23 school year. Dr. Picard.
Dwayne, are you? Okay, so what we wanted to do was to take the original district goals we set as a team and just provide some key points of where we're at on those goals. I have it up here. It's been a work in progress. We've been adding as we've been going since we've been back from the break. It's online. I will share that then with you as well. But we'll just kind of go through. I'm not going to spend a ton of time. At the end of the year, we could do a formal presentation with other information if this format doesn't work. But ultimately, looking at this goal one that we set. Scroll here. Providing a safe, secure environment. And I think if you remember when we started, I referenced that these are definitely broad goals that we're working through. As we progress over the next few years, we can target certain things. I thought it was important to stay into some of these key areas as we get started. So you can take a look. I don't need to read everything there. Please, as we're talking about this, ask questions if there's something you think we're missing, or if there's any thoughts. One thing I'll promote there is, of course, the increased SRO presence, having 3 of the 4 officers we approved. I don't think there's one person in this room that wouldn't say that's been a great addition. I know Denny Durr being here has been, a very positive, getting some time at White Deer, and then of course having Scott and Mark between the middle school and high school has been, very beneficial. Again, some of these things are consistent things that have been going on for years, as well as, some key pieces that we've added. The installation of cameras is always important, continuing to create that secure environment. Goal 2, I'm sorry, there's a little bit more on this. We're looking at new installation of high school cameras. Multi-factor authentication, always something I think that organizations are looking at. Can drive people crazy because logins become an issue, but at the same time, we got to do it. So we're working through all of that. So from a safety standpoint, Catherine, anything I know directly under you, anything else you want to add to? And great, thank you. And two things I also want to point out are, all schools, whether they want to admit it or not, there are issues, there are behavioral issues, there are student issues. We are absolutely seeing a major issue with vaping. We had Evan was in community wellness presenting to our high school kids. We are looking at vape detectors, hopefully through a grant. We're going to attack that. We're looking at opportunities. But it's important that we send the message that it is not okay anywhere, especially not in schools, no matter what. So our team is diligently working on that, especially at the high school and middle school levels, and creating systems that are in place, because unfortunately, the beauty of our schools is we get to see 2,000 kids from this community every day. The issue is kids make poor choices. And one of the things I stress with the administrative team is when that happens, what do we have in place to support the child, the family, and the other students? I wish I could look at everybody at this table and say, we can stop behaviors from happening. Like we are the one district that can. It doesn't happen here. It does. We can choose to ignore it, or we can choose to realize that there are the issues that happen everywhere, and we're doing what we can to tackle. And that's the question I constantly ask them is, what is it we can do? What is it we're not doing? What have we not done in the past that we can do now? So, safety and security, nothing happens. I think it's why it needs to always be goal one. Without that, we can't move to anything else. So a lot of things in the works, proud of the work that's being done, looking forward to new opportunities as we move forward. So goal 2. Well, let me, any questions from the board on goal 1? Any on safety and security?
Where are we on securing the fourth borough?
Where? She was done. And the right people. I mean, we got very lucky with Officer Davis is the right person.
Thank you.
Anything else on safety and security? Okay, goal 2, high quality curriculum instruction, right? You go from safety into the heart of what we do, which is our academics. And again, you can see some of the key pieces there. I'm excited. One of the things that recently, this past week that I've been talking, Mr. Slater or Dr. Kirkpatrick and I initially started, she was talking to me about it. Mr. Slater and I talked briefly, is that kindergarten badging system. I think, at the elementary level, we really, I don't want to say the word struggle, but we need to do a better job of reporting student progress to parents. And we have such an antiquated system of either grades or a 1, 2, 3, 4 that kind of matches PSSAs later. Not that you can't use those systems, people understand them, but we need to look at a real way of communicating that and not creating such a stigma to grades in kindergarten. So I'm excited. We're exploring it, but I think it's a great, when you look at a kind of a sub goal, I think that's going to be a really interesting thing for us as a district. And elementary schools, especially across this area, are looking at that. Like, what do you do differently that really gets information to parents on elementary students? So I think that's pretty exciting. Go ahead, Dwayne. Again, if you go back one, sorry. Just, a couple other things there. Continuous meetings. I give credit to the team. A lot of good things in place throughout the days with learning communities and discussions happening. Next week, I'm going to bring to you what I'm going to call the first reading of next year's calendar. I want to walk through a process with that. As part of that conversation, looking to the future, discussing the balance of, Act 80 days, which are, counted as student days versus maybe early dismissal days that we can use as planning time, where we're still having school, just in a different fashion. That's going to be, I think, a big piece of our puzzle as we move forward when it comes to, curriculum meetings, planning meetings, common planning, making sure that occurs. So that's such a critical piece. I think all teachers will tell you that when you're looking at curriculum instruction, having time together. Any other comments, Dr. Patrick? Anything else you want to add there? Okay. Anybody? Any questions from the board on that? Okay.
So Courtney has been looking at PSSA data, specifically at students that have scored advanced and highly advanced, if you will, like a score of 1200 or above in the areas, in the PSSA areas, as well as triangulating that with CDT data, iReady data, and is now looking at PBOS growth scores. And we are coming up with a small group of individuals that we would be considering for gifted evaluations. So there are two ways for students to be eligible for gifted. One is based just solely on IQ, and the other is on data. So Courtney has been spending a lot of time looking at that under the assessment data, and we'll be going to guidance and the classroom teachers and getting input from them for the potential recommendation of gifted evaluations for those individuals. We're trying to enhance our child find and certainly locate those kids that need that as part of their individualized education. So I just wanted to.
No, thank you. That's great. That was one of the goals of bringing Courtney in, is a deeper dive into the data. A great addition. Thank you. Any questions on that? Okay, goal 3, continuing on. Looking at employee expertise, there's 2 ways to identify this goal, is looking at, our expertise as leaders, working with our staff, as well as creating opportunities for our staff to be leaders. This is one we're going to continue to look at and find ways to do both those things I just spoke of. So, tuition reimbursement allows us to grow our staff. That is, we're seeing some great success with that. Derek, I think you added number 3 on there is one of the pieces you added.
I think I added 1 through 3.
You added 1 through 3. All right. So
And
is.
I see the typo says currently, comma, and that doesn't share after that. Currently, 40% of the people reporting to me in the district office are getting advanced coursework towards either a master's degree or further knowledge into where they're working currently. So I was excited about that.
Thank you.
Mhm.
So I think there, some of those pieces. I think the bottom one there, utilizing those advisory, again, going back to teacher meetings, as a vehicle for teacher leadership, teacher voice. And that's been an important thing we have focused on this year, is working with teachers, making sure they have a voice, making sure, we're listening. We can't always do what everybody wants, but it's important to gather lots of different perspectives. Goal 4. Anything else on goal 3 there? Go ahead, Dwayne. Community connections through clear and transparent communication. Working on this, on a daily basis. From a personal piece that I could have added there. I'm striving to make sure when parents want to meet with me, talk to me, I'm giving them that opportunity. That's an honest balance, because what's important is I can listen, but I need to make sure they are being guided back to the building level, the other leadership that can work with them. I can be a great tool for listening to make sure from a district standpoint, we are open, and I'm keeping that open door policy as much as I can with anybody, but making sure that the experts in what they're looking for in the buildings or other areas are having that opportunity. So couple highlights there. The groundbreaking of JFB was huge. I mean, big headline. That's such an important piece. We're working with Mr. Jones on a consistent approach with our staff of how to transmit information. Where do they go? Who does that? We're working with our coaches that have some technology background to be the vehicle for that as well. But trying to do that from a organized perspective so people know where to go with information versus, they send an email and it may not get responded to or it gets missed. So we're calling that the Panther Media Team. Working with Daily Ed and working with the Standard Journal, making sure we're connecting with them. And again, advisory committees, Andy, I think you added that for career and tech ed. There's some positives there. I think there's another goal 4 slide. Yep. I added there at the bottom, upcoming comprehensive planning community forums. So we are about to fully embark on over the next 6 weeks, the comprehensive plan that is required by the state of Pennsylvania. We need to have it posted by February 28th for approval by the board in March. So we have multiple meetings coming up here over the next few weeks, including 2 community forums. We'll add a little bit more on that next week, make sure parents are aware. We're going to do a big push on it. We want feedback. We're going to put a survey out. We want feedback either from families, community through the survey or through joining that committee and being part of that process over the next month. The nice part about that is it's not a long-term commitment. You're not involved for, months and months. It's over the next month where we really get the bulk of the work done. And then, it's the goal is that drives us for the next 3 years. That's the point of this. While we have to do it, it can also be a good driving force for the future. And we're actually, one of the things we're working with the high school on is branding and what our image is. So we're going to kind of combine that into our survey to gather some great data to use this as a tool for transparency with our community and our families. Any questions on that? Okay, last one, goal 5. It's a great lead in, purposely right into where Derek is going to go today, talking about the future, this year's budget, but looking to the future. So again, some key things there. I think the third one is going to be a creative one you're going to hear a lot more about in the future, which is using, we have cyber instruction. How do we creatively use our own people rather than outside programs to do our own cyber? This is beyond, I'm not talking about kids going to a different cyber. It's kids within our cyber or even our own students taking courses, virtually. While I will be the first to say, one of the things we all learned during COVID was that we need our schools. We need our kids in school. Most kids, we know for a fact it was a detriment to their education, but there are situations where some kids need this, but also opportunities for students to grow in different ways and take different courses. So we're looking at our way of doing that and as a cost savings, not only instructionally, but reducing cost. And I think there's a second part to goal 5. Yeah. Fiscal responsibility, making decisions regarding JFB. Jeff has been on that. We intend to have Damien here next week. He was not able to make tonight, so we moved his presentation to next week. We're going to talk through the next steps, some of the final projections and numbers we're gathering, going to work through that next step of the project. And I'll end with what I think is, a big highlight from since we've been back in January is budgeting and staffing discussions. We have sat down as a leadership team through some conversations with teachers about what the future of our elementary and our secondary look like, what do schedules look like, what does realignment. So we are really putting our plan together as we move forward in line with the financial needs of the district of what we believe is instructionally sound. So I'll add a little bit more in there when Eric is going to the budget. But I think last week, 2 or 3 different discussions for a couple hours of everybody leadership-wise sitting at the table, bringing the feedback they've had from their buildings on what is best for the district and having honest conversations, not all necessarily agreeing, but being willing to express our thoughts and ideas to come to some level of consensus and a future plan that is not only instructionally sound, but financially resilient. So that's been never an easy conversation when you're talking about money and positions, because we all know that I think the number we're going to shared tonight, right there, because 73% of our budget is staffing. So that's where savings come, but it's being smart on how we handle things. So again, those conversations are evolving, as a team, and we'll be sharing as we go through the next 2 months. My hope is to have a full out staffing report ready to go for February. Okay, thoughts, anything I missed from the leadership team you want to add? Any questions from the board?
I have a question.
Yes.
The teachers for the cyber school, are they going to be covering their own classroom and cyber school? Are they going to do
So-
both?
So one of the things we've got to, Mike, I'm going to let you answer.
Sorry, what was that again?
The teachers for the cyber school, are they going to cover their own classroom and cyber school? Are they doing both entities?
Currently, what we're currently doing, we have a class, two classes, technically, 2 or 3 classes throughout the day that are designed for any students that are taking online courses but are in the building.
Okay.
So that teacher that is covering those students, because they're working asynchronously on their computer, that teacher then is the teacher of record for their content area, whatever it may be. So we usually try to do the best that we can of covering the 4 content areas throughout the duration of the school year. That way we can better utilize the cost or best gain cost savings through this process, because then it's cheaper for our teacher to grade the content. So they have that block of time during the day where they're monitoring students that are in front of them that are working independently on the coursework, but then they have the ability to be able to grade students, either cyber students or potentially students in front of them. Does that make sense?
The students in front of them are cyber students, they're just doing it in school, or are they a regular?
A
class?
regular ed student that just happens to have a block in their schedule where they are
In that
working
class?
on an asynchronous course. Yes. It's the same platform as our cyber students, but they're just taking a singleton course, one course that they take.
And Dr. Strasser, I think next on the 14th,
Mhm.
when we get to celebrate Valentine's all together.
Yeah.
That part of the presentation that night is going to be cyber. So we're hoping Dr. Zolonis will be here with Mr. Berge to kind of give a future oversight of what that looks like.
Thank you.
Good question. Anything else? Okay, thank you.
Finally, under executive review, next week's agenda, if you have any questions on 6A, B, or C, is there anything to fit in under 6A1, school district affiliation agreement between Milton School District and Slippery Rock Department of Nursing? Just the agreement.
Yep.
Okay. We'll be approving the school calendar.
Like I said, what we're gonna do in the school calendar is a first read, and I'll walk you through, I think. I'll say now, my opinion of the school calendar is this. We sat and looked at it with some feedback. I'm having the teachers give it to Mr. Slusser. He's looking at it with the union representation. I also think it's important for us to take a look at it, to make it public. I'm an advocate that if families or community people have a little bit of a say, I'm okay with that. I think this calendar runs people's lives for the next year. So I'm open to, feedback or some thoughts. So I'd like to work through that and then do a formal approval in February.
Or any other questions? Comments? Okay. All right, Finance Committee, Mr. Frederick.
Well, thank you, Mrs. Rance. We're going to start out with a review of the proposed preliminary budget for the 2023-2024 school year. Mr. Fink, if you would.
So I apologize to Mr. Hosterman. He won't have the full budget book in front of him, but I know Dwayne will present on the screen for us. Every board member, and I think there's some extras over here at the end for any administrators who'd like to grab one. There's a budget book. This is for you to review later. This is the entirety of the proposed preliminary budget. I will say I was in charge of printing them myself and I completely beefed it. So there is a good chance there's pages missing, but I will make sure that we post on the website the actual complete accurate version. So please, if it seems to skip a page, just let me know. It was horrible. It was a mess. And what we're going to cover, though, is the presentation that Dwayne has up there that says financial update and proposed preliminary budget. So this is how I did it last year. I like doing it this way because it kind of covers two topics. It covers our 21-22 annual financial review, so we can see where we were. And then it's going to cover our 23-24 proposed preliminary budget to see where we're going. So I'm going to jump right in to page 3. We're going to lead off with the annual financial review. And if anyone has questions, feel free to jump in. There may be some things that I'll cover later in the presentation. So if that's the case, I'll let you know that we'll get to it. But I certainly don't want to steamroll and have you guys forget to ask any questions you might have. So when we're looking at the annual financial review, the first thing we're going to cover is the revenues. So we closed out 21-22 with much more in the way of collected revenues than we planned. The biggest factor to that, in fact, the factor as to why we got 12% more in revenues is due to the grants that we received. That was really in the throes of federal funding for COVID relief. We also received better than expected local revenues through tax collection. We collected at a really high rate, and we weren't expecting that. We collected a lot more delinquent taxes than we typically do, and we had a big boost in transfer taxes. There must have been 1 or 2 really large property sales that happened because we saw a much higher increase in the realty transfer tax. So what that meant is that we ended up finishing the year in a really positive light when it came to revenues. State revenues came in sort of where expected. 52,000 may seem like a lot, but that's pretty well spot on in the grand scheme of things. And then again, federal revenues, 107% higher than anticipated because of those grants. So I never like to build in any grants that I don't know if we will actually receive or not. I'd rather wait to see and go in conservatively. So I'm going to move on to page 4. Page 4 covers the expenditure side of 21-22. So not surprisingly, we went over our budgeted expenditures. And I'll point out one area specifically, and that is under facilities. Facilities, we were $1.9 million above budgeted because we didn't budget anything there. All of that money is for the high school HVAC project. So that was something that we decided mid-year that we were going to split between bond funds and our ESSER's grant money. So that 1.9 million that we spent unbudgeted was completely paid for through ESSER's funding. You just won't see that on the expenditure side because it's reflected on the revenue side. So if you remove that piece, we actually underspent our budgeted expenditures. So all in all, looking back at the year, it's a crazy time to try and project finances being in the middle of the pandemic. But we came out on the positive side. We came out with a budget surplus of 2.8 million when we were expecting a deficit. So that surplus goes into our fund balance, and I'm going to explain how that fund balance is going to really help the district going forward as I move through the presentation. Any questions on revenues, expenditures for 21-22? All right. So to wrap up the 21-22 AFR, as I said, our anticipated fund balance, this is looking at where we expect to be at the end of this school year. And that is with a total fund balance of $8,620,394. We currently have funds assigned and committed to technology maintenance, capital projects, and the CTE programs. We will be redistributing those funds typically every winter, usually January, February. We'll present as the administration to the board what we think we should do with the committed and assigned funds. And then we will bring that up for discussion and vote later on. But what that does is we are limited to how much we can have unassigned. It can't be more than 8% of our total budget. So that means we do have to commit and assign funds to different areas of our district's expenditures. Any questions at all? That wraps up the very brief 21-22 annual financial review. Sum it up. We did well. We were benefited by grants. Grants are probably going to dry up, at least the unanticipated federal ones. But all in all, we made it through that tough time pretty well. So now we're going to move into, what everyone is surely so excited to talk about, and that's the proposed preliminary budget. So I'm going to start by talking about what a proposed preliminary budget is, because I think this is really important to make sure we all understand. What we're talking about tonight and what we're voting on tomorrow or next week is just a proposal to advertise a preliminary budget. So think of it, the preliminary budget is our rough draft. It is our first pass. It has not, we collected everything. I aggregate it from all of our directors, from all of our building leads. I put the data in, I review, previous 3, 5, 7 years of historical financial data and just put it in there. And then what we do is as we get closer to voting for the final budget, I continue to check on revenue sources. I look for updates from the state. I meet with department heads if something's changing, because we're trying to plan on what our expenses are going to be for over a year away from where we are now. So with that said, moving forward, the proposed preliminary budget just kind of keeps things on track. It is in no way agreeing to the budget. It is not an assignment of tax changes in any way. It is a place for us to begin, and it's an opportunity for us to have this kind of a discussion where we can review the financial data with our stakeholders, our plans, our projections, and discuss the future of the district. So any questions on proposed preliminary budget? So, okay, so next week we vote to authorize the advertisement of it, so then we can share it with everybody. Then we come back the next month and we actually vote on accepting that preliminary budget. Even at that point, nothing is set in stone. That's still a rough draft. Nothing is final until May when we do our final budget vote. So slide 8, budget timeline. I already touched on this. In bold is tonight what we're doing. We're going to review and discuss the 23-24 proposed preliminary budget. Next week, we'll vote to allow the authorization to post that budget. And then everyone else here gets to do the fun stuff of doing their budget presentations over the next 2 months. So we'll have really full nights on the 14th of February and March, where we have technology, maintenance, cyber, safe schools doing their board report and budget report, and then we'll have regular ed, special ed, and CTE going in March. And then once we get to April is where we start talking about final budget. That's where we're going to do proposed final and then move to the actual final budget vote. And sorry, just one thing to add here. There will be, I think it's in April, and potentially, I think in April, we're going to have to do a vote on a committee night because there's advertisement requirements. We have to have 30 days between, and spring break always throws a wrench into that because it moves our dates around for our board meeting. So I'll remind everybody, but do expect to have to cast a vote on one of our committee nights during that springtime season. Okay. Slide number 9, proposed preliminary budget highlights. So expenditures are currently sitting at $40,334,967. This is a change of 5.5% from current budget. And then revenues, we have $37,851,409, and this is a change of 0.27 decrease from the current budget. This leaves us with a proposed preliminary deficit of 2.4 million. Our current projected fund balance to start that budget season is $8,620,394. So that means that if we pass this budget as it is untouched, we would have a remaining fund balance at the end of that budget year of $6,236,836. Next page. It does a breakdown of what makes up our budget. Like, where are we spending our money? So we use object codes. Objects are just ways to describe different budgetary expenditures. So for instance, Object 100s is all salaries and wages for district employees. Object 200 is all benefits, medical insurance, dental insurance, retirement, tuition, Social Security. And it's good to look at it this way because you can see what is eating up our expenditures. Where are we spending our money? So if you look at objects 100 and 200, and this is what Dr. Bickhart touched on earlier, we're up around 73% of our total budgetary expenditure is paying our employees and paying their benefits. So when we look at impacts and way to impact the budget, the biggest is always through staffing, because that is, by and large, the biggest expenditure that we will have every single year, as long as, we're operating a school district. So any questions on budget composition? It's very similar year over year. We don't see big changes in that. Okay. So now I'm going to talk about on slide 11. This is going to get kind of into the meat of the discussion and presentation. And it's going to talk about tax equalization and the impact to our taxpayers from a proposed tax increase. So for any board members who haven't been here through this process before, I always begin the proposed preliminary budget with a full Act 1 tax increase. I'm a firm believer, but that it is necessary. I always believe it's necessary. The Act 1 index is dictated by the state average weekly wage and by the federal index for the cost to operate a school and pay school employees. So when you get your district individualized Act 1 index, that is what is telling you is a fair and safe way to increase taxes that the community can support and that can also support your school. So off my soapbox, now we'll talk about the difficulties we have of being a district that has 2 counties. When you have a single county, you get your Act 1 index, it could be 5%. You say, okay, I can't raise beyond 5%. You increase the mills by 5%, that's it. Easy, done, you're good. When you have a multi-county, we have to make sure that Union County's tax levy growth and Northumberland County's tax levy growth are the exact same. So if we are increasing the total revenue gained from Northumberland County citizens for us by 7%, we have to increase the total levy gained from the Union County citizens by 7%. And the way you determine how much the tax levy is by multiplying the assessed values of the parcels times the millage rates. So the district controls millage rates. We do not control assessed values. Assessed values are done by the county assessment team. We have no control over that. So for 23-24, we are seeking a total tax levy of $14,027,566. That tax levy is made up of 66.16% coming from Northumberland County citizens, which equals 9.2 million. And then the remaining 33.84% comes from Union County, which is 4.7 million. The way we get those percentages is we look at the STEB market value. So what are homes selling for in each county? And then how much of basically a market share those 2 counties have. And for us, it's a 2-to-1 split. So any questions on tax levy and how we determine that? Okay. So next page, this is looking at the actual tax equalization as presented in this preliminary budget. So I'm going to start with Northumberland County. So when we're looking at this, if you look at 22-23 market value, the market value increased by 1.2 million for our Northumberland County properties from last year to what's being projected for 23-24. The assessed value increased by 1.5 million, and we are looking to generate 9,280,000 in assessed mills or tax levy. So the way we get that is we have the assessed value of 121 million. We multiply that by the proposed millage to then get our tax levy of 9,280,000. What that gets us is a change from the prior year of $628,397. So essentially, it's a 4 mil increase for Northumberland County that equates to an additional $628,397 more than they paid last year as a county whole. And that percentage increase of taxes collected, now it's not percentage of millage increase, it's percentage of tax levy, is 7.26%. So jump down to the Union County. You can see what we're looking at there is a tax levy increase of 321,388. Again, it's sort of a 2-to-1 ratio, just like we saw on the last page, but it equals perfectly the 7.26% increase. However, here's the kicker and why it gets tricky with tax equalization. When you look at the mills, to get that amount from Union County, we actually have to reduce their millage rate. So Union County would see a small decrease for most homeowners in their property tax bill based on this projection. The reason is assessed values in Union County jumped by almost $22.3 million. They had a huge assessed value increase. And it's like I said, tax levies determined by assessed values times millage rates. And when you look historically at Milton, this happens often. We've had a number of years where Northumberland County had more assessed value increase, and so their millage rates went down, where Union counties went up. And I'll cover some of that in the slides going forward, but it's something to just be aware of, that because Union County or White Deer Township had such a large jump in assessed values, they're still paying more in their taxes. It's just increasing due to assessed value and not millage rates. Does that make sense? I try not to lose everyone on that, and I want to make sure that we have a good understanding of it. So moving on from there, I'm going to break it down and look at the taxpayer impact per county. So this is Northumberland County. And so like I was saying, the millage rate for 22-23 was 72.3. We're projecting a 4.03 millage increase, bringing the total mills to 76.33. That's a 5.57% increase, which is below the 5.6% Act 1 index. The median assessed parcel value for that county is $15,150. That means the annual impact to the median taxpayer for the entire year would be $61 more than they paid the previous year, which equals out to about $5 per month. And then the graph that I did next to that actually shows you the number of parcels and where they'd fall. I put them in bins for how much their tax increase would be. So 2,196 of our residents, by far the largest amount, will see less than a $50 a year tax increase. When you go out forward from that, you can see that some will be much larger. 65 that are 250 to 500, 33 that are 500 to 1,000. A lot of those are commercial properties. All of those are extremely valuable properties. They're all on the high end, which is why they see a larger increase when the millage goes up, because they're getting the same mills as anyone else. The difference is assessed values. Any questions on that one? Okay. So next page is the Union County taxpayer impact. So as I mentioned, the assessed values increase. So that means that to offset that, they actually see a millage decrease of 0.19. So that's a 1.07% decrease. For them, the median parcel value is $93,470. That impact to the median homeowner would be a reduction of $17.76. Did the same thing with the graph to show you where people fell with their tax reduction they would see. Almost everybody sees less than a $50 decrease on their tax bill per the millage. There's a few that see higher amounts. Again, those higher amounts are based on commercial properties or really valuable homes. But just about everyone would be seeing a small decrease. There wouldn't be a big jump down. Any questions on that one? Okay, next one is, this is something that I haven't shared before, but I think it helps illustrate the Act 1 index and why it is an important thing for us to follow. This shows the average annual income and property tax increases and decreases. So what I did was I took the state average wage and I looked at how much that changes annually, year over year. So how much more money is the average wage earner in our state earning compared to the year before? And then I did the same thing for Social Security earners for the average retired worker who receives Social Security. I took their cost of living increase and multiplied that by their average wage that they get from Social Security and showed that annual growth year over year. So you can see which makes sense. You can see the state average wage earner, the green line, is following a very similar pattern to the blue line of the Social Security cost of living increases. That's because as we moved through the pandemic, a lot of these numbers went up. People started getting paid more. We saw increases due to cost of living from inflation. All of these things that impact homeowners impact school districts as well. What we aren't seeing is our tax changes matching the pattern of the graph. And that's a problem. We shouldn't be as high as them. We're seeing, the average wage earner might get, $1,500 more per year. We're talking about a $50 increase, and we should always be in that 50, 100, 150, never big jumps. But what we want to see is our lines following that same pattern. If they're increasing and people are earning more money, it means that they can support the increase in taxes paid to the school district. But beyond that, it means we as a district are facing those same pressures. We are facing inflation. We had to increase the pay rate for all of our employees to keep people working here. We can't do that year over year and not match and keep up with what's happening in the economy around us. So that is an illustration as to how I believe we should always be looking at our growth. And when you follow the Act 1 index year over year, you'll start to match that pattern. That's why that pattern is laid out in that way and why we receive that index cap. Oh, yeah,
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
But I mean, with the social security increases, I think one thing we need to consider though too, like what's keeping pace with that also is the Medicare premiums are increasing and they don't have a choice over that. So if you look
Right.
at the actual difference in what they're getting, those increases are coming out in the wash.
Sure,
It
sure.
might be $2 overall because their Medicare premiums increase without. they don't have the
Right,
ability to
right.
change it.
Yeah, and it's important to know that with this is a generalized statistic. You're gonna have situations like that where it's more impactful for certain people. You're gonna see things that may wash out. But you can't deny that it's more expensive to run a district year over year, and more money is coming into the economy, and we're seeing that growth, and it's not matching what the district is bringing in. Like it. And so I can appreciate that, and I can appreciate that there's going to be a certain section of our population that will always struggle to make ends meet, no matter what. And so it's always a difficult conversation. I think what I wanted to illustrate with that, though, was what the Act 1 index is used for and what a lot of districts do to follow it. Does that make sense?
No, I'm with you. I just, when I was looking at that, I'm like, oh, but those Medicare premiums
Right.
match the increase, at least for the last few times they've done it.
Right, gotcha. Thank you. So from there, I wanted to look at a 7-year projection because I have been talking about the fiscal cliff for probably 3 years, ever since we hit COVID. And we've been projecting and looking at the impact of receiving one-time large grants and using that to help pay for salaries. So this isn't something unique to us. This is statewide. Districts are going to face this. It's going to be difficult, but I know we'll work through it and end up in a good spot. So the way we overcome a deficit like this is I think by good planning. So what I did was I put together a 7-year projection. Part of that projection does include what Dr. Bickhart was speaking about, where we were looking at ways to reduce our overall staffing that doesn't impact education in any way, doesn't require furloughs, it's achieved through natural attrition, and it's done slowly over time to help progress us to a point where we're bringing our expenditures down while simultaneously trying to match and meet our revenues. So the comparisons that I run, we're really seeking for a break-even point. Where can we no longer have a $2.4 million deficit or a $2 million deficit that we were kind of kicking down the road with government funds, with one-time CARES money? And how can we get to where we're fully sustainable and our revenues match our expenditures and we're moving forward at a really nice, even pace? So what I did for the comparison over the 7 years was look at regular sustainable tax increases compared to a lack of tax increases. So basically, following estimated average Act 1 index and then no tax increase, just to give us that range. Obviously, within that range, you can have different variations, but I think it's a good illustration to show how the change can take place. And then for expenditures, I did a growth of 2% compared to a growth of 3%. A growth of 3%, I think, is definitely achievable by us. I don't think that's too tough to meet when we're working in a really streamlined manner and avoiding increases. A 2% growth to our budget is tougher, but I think we can do it. And I think that's a case where we want to look toward limiting the expenditure growth, focusing on 2% year over year, while simultaneously following the Act 1 index to, as quickly as possible, get us to a spot where we're breaking even, but we aren't cutting major things. We aren't making it difficult or less effective to educate our students. And so the final thing when talking about those comparisons is then the impact on the fund balance. So I'm going to move on to the next slide, which is 17. And 17 shows the 7 years. So it starts with our projection for the 23-24 preliminary budget. Pink line at the top would be our expenditures at a 3% annual growth, factoring in projection in staff reduction to meet our current needs. And then the red line is 2% annual growth while factoring in some staff reduction that we think is easily achievable. The Darker green line is the Act 1 index increase based on a 7-year average. I just looked back at what our increases were, averaged that out, and then took that going forward. And then the light green line will be if we did no tax increases. So if you looked at, like I said, meeting in the middle, if we capped our expenditures year over year at 2%, and we followed Act 1 tax increases, then we would break even in the 2029 year. So at that point, deficit is eliminated, and we would be in a position to really look at strengthening either our fund balance and start committing savings to large capital improvements, or looking at potential tax breaks at that time. Any questions on break-even point? And then down below, you can see the numbers that I used to get those. But I tried to do what I thought was a fairly conservative estimate. I did account for things like growth of basic ed funding, special education funding, some changes in projected tax collections. So all of that is factored in here as a conservative measure of how we're looking at a 7-year kind of push forward. So the big thing is then, how does that impact our fund balance? So on slide 18, if you look at the blue bars, that is that projection of the meeting in the middle. That's Act 1 index increases, 2% expenditure growth. And 7 years forward, if you look, I circled fund balance is at a break-even point in the 29-30 school year. And at that point, we will have never dropped into the negative, and we will have maintained a fund balance throughout. The importance of that is when unexpected things happen, we always want to have some money in savings to cover that. We don't want to be left strapped and worrying about cash flow on a weekly, monthly, quarterly basis. So that pattern keeps us above water the entirety of the time until we are able to make that break-even point. The orange one is the opposite. That's the outliers. That's no Act 1 index increases and a 3% expenditure growth. And if you see following that pattern, by 26-27, we are out of money, and going into 27-28, our fund balance can no longer close the deficit, and we are losing a larger amount of money. They're growing farther apart year over year. And the reason for that is, and the thing to be careful about with tax increases and tax changes is that every year you don't go to the Act 1 index, that money is never recoverable. You're capped at whatever the percentage is. So the only way you could get that money back would be by going to a referendum vote and having the taxpayers vote to accept a larger than Act 1 index tax increase. And to my knowledge, I think State College is the only district that's ever done it. It's extremely rare. And so it's tough to make up things that are lost when you're talking about local tax revenue. So to kind of wrap up that 7-year projection, again, I try to be conservative about it. We could certainly reach the break-even point sooner. It could take longer. A lot of things can happen in that amount of time. I mean, we look 7 years back and just look at all the things that impacted our district that we didn't account for. So potential impacts to projection, just a few to list off the top, is large changes or reforms in state and federal funding. If we see a much bigger increase in state basic ed funding or special ed funding, that would be huge. It would really take some of the burden off the local taxpayer. Same with federal funding. Significant changes in assessed property values. Everyone saw in my earlier slides how assessed property value increases greatly increase the tax revenue without us having to change millage rates. Future collective bargaining agreements, Act 93 agreements, and classified staff agreements. We're in a great spot now where we've just redone all of those, but within this 7-year period, we're going to have to address those again, and those can be costly depending on how that agreement plays out. Introduction, removal, or major changes to grant funding could impact this. Inflation or other external economic factors could be a major impact. Charter school tuition, or knock on wood, charter school reform for the tuition would be huge benefit to the district as far as costs go. And then finally, special education. Special education is an extremely expensive area of our budget that we really don't have much control over. It can have vast swings in our expenditures. And unfortunately, we don't see the swings on the revenue to match it. So those are the areas within that projection that could really skew things. My goal going forward, though, would be every January when we sit down and do this, updating that projection, seeing where we are based on the previous year's AFR and our projections going forward. So that's everything that I have regarding the proposed preliminary budget. Any questions on that? I also know you guys are going home with a large budget book. So that is the entirety of the budget. Every single penny is in that budget book. And except for the pages I missed, but that will be posted tomorrow. So please check the digital version. And we'll also get that posted for the public too. We always put that budget book up so they can look at it too. So everyone can see what we're looking for or we're looking towards regarding expenditures and revenues.
You tell me a summary of how many large businesses in our area are not paying taxes because of.
Are not paying taxes?
Because of tax forgiveness or.
There's a few that come to mind that are on the, oh my gosh, help me out. What's the,
Industrial park.
no, the agreement that we have that, yes, KOZ, thank you.
Oh, okay. the
Yes.
KOZ,
So we have a number of properties on KOZ, but that's a reduction that's tiered. So year over year, they're paying a little more taxes than they were previously. And I think that's over 10 years. So we have a few of those. We have other ones, a large one like GAF. I know that they have the tax forgiveness. That will end. Off the top of my head, I don't know the exact date. I have to pull that agreement out, but that's something that as they expand and continue to grow and that forgiveness goes away, will help in a big way.
What about Wise Markets?
They consistently, Wise Markets, ConAgra, Susquehanna Motors, a lot of the businesses in Northumberland County specifically have appealed their tax assessed rates, and most of them we've come to an agreement to. So we do see they do that often. They have attorneys that reach out directly to them every single year that says, "Hey, you don't pay us unless we win. Let's go to the assessment office and appeal this and get our assessment rates reduced." So what we do as the district is, myself and one of our attorneys, typically Attorney Edwards, we will appeal their assessed change. If it's a larger one that we feel it's not quite fair, we get an appraisal done. And then usually based on our appraisal, their appraisal, we come to an agreement. Almost every single one though has been a reduction. So that impacts all taxpayers.
It does, yeah.
Yes.
It's not a fair share, is it?
I mean, homeowners have the right to do it too. But we don't see as many of those. It's much more on the commercial side for sure.
Nice to control that a little better.
We keep our eye. We don't just let them go. We at least fight for what we can. And there was one day, I think 2 years ago, where we had 9 in a row in Northumberland County, where I sat there all day. Yeah, just one after another.
Yeah.
Hey, Derek, can I have a couple comments?
Oh, yeah.
I'd just like to point out again, year after year, we look at the discrepancy between the median assessed value between Union County and Northumberland County. And I think it's again worth pointing out that huge discrepancy that we every year have to deal with. We are one of just a handful of districts that are split between counties. Even though we're around split between 3, I think we're maybe 13 out of 500. So this is an issue that comes up every year. And really, I think I'd just like to say it needs to go back to the counties to get their act together, especially Northumberland County when it comes to assessed property values.
And I'll add to that. Because it's been 50 years since Northumberland County did a countywide assessment.
1972.
Yeah, that was 51 years now. And
Who's counting but us?
What's that?
Nobody's counting but us.
yeah.
Probably.
So in 2006, I believe it was for Union County. If we ever had them both reassessed in the same year, it really opens up our options as a district as to how we rebalance between counties. Right now, the only way we can do it is by matching the increase in the tax levy, that 7.6% that I showed. If they were assessed countywide at the same time and there was actually equality across the 2 counties, we could then set an even millage rate. We could say we're increasing mills for each county by 1, make it perfectly even and do it by millage as opposed to doing it by revenue generated. So something that just gives us options, because there's 3 different ways you can look at it as a district. We can only do one. literally cannot do it any other way because the millage rate is so low in Union County compared to how high it is in Northumberland. It would completely throw everything out of whack.
So I have a couple more questions. I tried to butt in earlier, but I think I missed my opportunity regarding the AFR for this current year. I'm curious, I was looking at the breakdown on, I think it's page 4. What contributes to the 28.7% increase in extracurriculars?
Sure. That is directly attributable to the purchase of the equipment for the Wellness and Fitness Center. So that was covered by the capital campaign. So it's again, is similar to the facilities unbudgeted purchase where we see unexpected or unanticipated expenditures, but they're being offset by unanticipated revenues on the revenue side. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Yep.
And finally, my last question, the increase that we've seen that led to the $4 million surplus in revenue this year, is that all federal grant money or is that, has that been made possible by some of our employees and their hard work in writing grants?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up. No, Dr. Kirkpatrick and Catherine Gurton and everyone else who had a hand in generating any grant revenue for the district certainly takes credit for that. It is not all through CARES and ESSER's funding. They do an incredible job of bringing that in. And, you know, Catherine just casually mentions, oh yes, we have a $250,000 grant that we're looking to spend for security. Like that is a common occurrence within our district and something that really, really helps us when we're looking at ways to offset, you know, unanticipated expenditures or look at increasing things like our security and school safety. So yeah, that is not to be missed. And I feel remiss for not including that in the presentation.
Yeah, I'd like to tip my hat to those folks and thank you for your hard work in doing that. I know a lot of school districts have full-time grant writers. We do not, and that's a conversation we've talked about with the capital campaign moving forward and how to continue to secure additional funds for the district. So thanks to those folks.
Okay, well, I want to thank Mr. Fink for putting together this presentation. I would say, especially for the newer members of the board, if you have any additional questions, because this is a lot to take in, reach out to Mr. Moser and myself, and we'll work with Mr. Fink to get the answers for you.
So before we finish with this, I think it's important, you know, as I took over in July and we looked at this, it's been a complete team effort as we've analyzed all aspects of the budget from last year, from previous years, and looking at this. You know, I commend Derek, the work he's done when we went back over this and the time he spent on this is incredible, and he's very knowledgeable about it. From my perspective in this seat, we do not take lightly the conversation about raising taxes, any capacity. I am in full agreement with Derek that as a district, I think it is a key component to moving forward to be financially stable in the future. But we need to look at it from the perspective of each individual in our community. How does it impact them? So when we're doing that, I think it's important that we remember we're also trying to look at creative ways that help our community members. For example, one of the most impactful things we did for a large portion of our taxpayers that have kids in this district is through our free lunch and our free breakfast program with Ashley's work, possibly for the next 4 years. That is so significant when you look at that cost to a family paying lunch every day if they work. Okay, it's huge. You know, honestly, mathematically, what they would pay this year alone would cover 7 years of tax increases. It really would when we look at it like that. Again, I am not by any means saying a tax increase is a insignificant thing. It is a huge thing for many people, for most people. We looked at our senior citizens and we offered free admission to events that would cost multiple dollars each time, and over 10 or 15, that increases pay out of their pocket. Okay. We're looking at ways can we get our athletes and our high school kids to go out and help our senior citizens in the community. Weeding, doing things. Rod and I have talked about that along with the high school. Can we do dinners that we bring them in where they connect with the school? So how do we use community connecting to us in some ways to save a little bit of money for those people, where it's a give and take relationship as we look to the future. What Derek projected for you over 7 years was something that he and I, the team, have talked about. We want to be able to look to the future and have a plan. I think it's important for the community to see that we are thinking about the future. And not only may we ask for tax increases in a balancing means, we have to look at what are we doing internally. If we're going to ask out the community to do things, what are we doing internally? Okay. That number of 12 there, I think, is important for me to comment on. That is not just go out and get rid of 12 positions. That is not furlough people. It's the last thing I would do. My whole goal is to create a team, create culture. However, to move forward, we need to look at our enrollment. We need to look at what we're doing when it comes to what should our realignment, what should our schools look like when we finish the Baca renovation? What can we make White Deer? Okay, what can the high school and middle school look at when it comes to the future of their courses and their schedule? How does that then impact what we believe is best for kids first? And that's what I kept stressing to this team. We do what's best for kids first, and then we become financially resilient because of that. So while we're pulling back a little bit, and when I say 12 positions, I absolutely do believe that it's probably 10 is a key number that I feel does not horribly hurt us. Any reduction in staff means we're doing something different. But if we do something smart, we're still keeping consistency with our enrollment. If we get past at 11, 12, now we're going to be really diving into some significant programming things over the course of time. But we're doing this over a few years. But I think it is extremely important that our community knows we are looking to the future. You know, I appreciate Derek saying 7 years because he's being conservative. I'm a firm believer that as a team and as an organization, if we commit and we move forward and the community sees we're saying, hey, we're going to do some things for you. Tax increases are important, whether we like them or not, but we're also going to tighten what we're doing and to look at what is in the best interest of our programs. If we're meeting in the middle there, then it's a community effort. So again, we're not taking this lightly. This has been, at least for the past 6 weeks consecutively, hours each day saying, what do we need to do as we project out for the future? But we also want to be a district that is financially stable, that is looking. And this is not just Milton. Other districts are having the same conversation. Everybody is talking about the cliff fall because of federal monies, and then they just go away. Okay. But we're hopeful. We are a great district. The work that's been done here over the past few years has put us in that situation. But I think it's now about moving forward and looking to our community. And I'm saying that here. I just opened up earlier with saying my door is open. Again, I do not take lightly the conversation about tax increases, and I welcome any conversation. Mr. Fink and I are going to open that to the board, making sure if you know, each one of you has an opportunity to sit and talk with us. That goes for the community too. It's that important that we come together as a community and look to the future of this district. So many of the things I just said here, I'm probably going to have to say a couple of times as we move forward, because it's that important as we do this. But we do not take this lightly, and we understand it's our responsibility to not only, if we're going to ask, to give back and do some things differently. So a lot of great work going on, you know, and I look forward to this conversation continuing with the board.
Okay, moving on to item 6B, we have a discussion around the PFM resolution. Mr. Fink?
Oh, yeah, this is more of just a reminder than a discussion. It was advertised over the weekend just about the parameters resolution for the potential bond offering that we're looking at to finish up the construction at Baca. I just wanted to bring it up today before we vote on it next week, just to make everyone aware. The resolution says up to $12 million in borrowing. That is just a high-end parameter that allows them to go out and get what we want. It is not us going to 12 million. And what we're doing is just continuing the process of approving PFM to then go out for sale whenever we are ready. So whenever we say we want $9 million, we want $10 million, as soon as we tell them that, they then prepare everything to go out. This resolution just gives them the kind of the go ahead to actually start getting the legal documents ready to then go when the time is right. So any questions on that? This is the same thing we passed last year when we did the borrowing. Okay, thank you.
And then the only other thing under finance are the proposed agenda items for next week, which are the items we've already talked about this evening, as well as the normal bills and fund transfers. Any other questions for finance? Nothing further, Mrs. Rance.
Thank you. All right, Personnel Committee, Mr. Frederick and Dr. Weaver.
Just have the proposed agenda items for next week. Are there any questions about that? I don't think there's anything outside of the normal. Rules of substitutes, leave, etc. Hearing nothing further.
Thank you. Facilities Committee, Mr. Hosterman or Mrs. Kessler.
Lindsay, go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. So under facilities tonight, we have item 8A, which is the Bacher canopy discussion.
Yeah, Mr. Spar will be here next week with us. He was unable to make it tonight, I think, in light of our two presentations anyway. That'll be a good time to look at some of the pricing. Jeff, anything you want to add leading into that at this point, going to next week?
We'll talk about the engineer.
Go for it.
So the Bacher canopy, we elected not to go with John Howard's design and went ahead and got another engineering company and architects, structural engineers to look at a new design for the Bacher canopy to make it a little more advantageous for us to move ahead. So what that is there's going to be there's maybe 5-6 page document that states basically we're going to hire the engineer and work for the district. The engineer is going to design the canopy through the school board and the team. And we'll agree to their design or change, whatever, come back with pricing. Once we agree to everything, then it'll go out to bid, just like everything else. So basically what we need to do is talk about hiring the engineering firm. That's,
And the key there is while there's a cost to that, it allows us the flexibility to choose what we want.
yes.
Okay, thank you. Also on the agenda, we have proposed agenda items for next week, which includes that proposal for, to get the architect settled so we can move on with the canopy. Just so everybody's aware, so we're all on the same page, the canopy is going to be outside of the building, obviously, out front of the school where the kids wait. So if you have a kiddo that goes here and they get a bus pickup or anything like that, they have a separate lot. But the kids that are picked up, by the parents or walkers, if it's raining or snowing or whatever it might be, this will allow coverage so that they're not standing out in the rain. So that's the whole purpose behind it. So going with a different architect is going to allow us to move forward faster on the project. So thank you, Jeff. And then some other proposed agenda items were just Site Logic will be here, Damien next week to give us an update. And then also we have the Milton Historical Society to hold a lecture series in the high school. So just a facility use request is all. Does anybody have any questions? Hearing nothing, I think that's all, Mrs. Rance. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Legislative and Policy Committee, Dr. Strasser. Mr. Hosterman.
So we have just the proposed agenda items. The recommended approval of the first reading of select policies and the recommended approval of the final reading of select policies as well. Other than the regular agenda we have for tonight.
All right, thank you. Athletics and Extracurricular Committee. Mr. Hosterman, and if you want Mr. Hunt to read that.
Sure, go ahead, Josh. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Rance. So for under athletics, all we have is, it looks like a coach and some event workers for approval for TB test. And that is just under the regular agenda items for next week.
Questions from anyone?
That'll be it then, Mrs. Rance.
Education and Technology Committee. Back to Mrs. Kessler.
Thank you, Mrs. Rance. We have a CTE presentation.
Yes, good evening, board. Mr. Gambling, are we able to get that presentation up? Thank you. So I come to you this evening with a proposal of sorts. What we would like to do within our career and technical education program is in essence, drop our accounting program or close our accounting program and open up what's called an entrepreneur program or entrepreneurship, which is a SIP. And the reason I bring it up to you this evening is if you remember last year when we did have to unfortunately close the drafting program, I do need board approval to move forward with that. But my purpose here this evening is kind of explain what it is. I don't look at it as the closing of a program. I really look at it as a rebranding of a program. So what we want to do is close the current accounting program and open entrepreneurship, SIP code 52.0701. The purpose of this really, I'm going to go into it a little bit deeper, is that over the past several years, we've noticed that while as a whole, our business and education courses are very heavily enrolled. Our accounting program, in terms of students that are considered full-time students, is not one of our more populated programs. We have a lot of students that take kind of the courses independently, but in terms of the students taking all of the courses required to complete the accounting program as a whole, we don't see those numbers as high. But what we do see is a large number of students that are interested in a broad spectrum of business areas. So what we want to do, and again, I'll explain, but the entrepreneurship program is going to allow us to not only touch on accounting, but also things like marketing, finance, real estate, sales, business management, all of those different areas, which gives us kind of a more holistic approach to the business education model, as opposed to just singularly focusing on accounting. So we go to the next slide. If you look right now for our current enrollment, and this is just a snapshot of all of our courses that are offered within our business education program or business education department, I'd say as a whole, 19 students in accounting, 42 students in our life course, which stands for law, investment, financial education, 18 in sports and entertainment marketing, 11 in PC Now Intro to Business, which is a college course, 15 in PC Now Social Media, Business and Society. Again, that is a college course. And then 15 in our computer information and technology. So you see that they are very well represented in terms of students taking those courses. But we see the students enjoying a wide variety of those courses, again, instead of just singularly focusing on accounting. So really how this came about was every couple months, I get together with several regional directors in career and tech ed. And we just kind of talk about the current happenings, current events, the goings-ons, things that are happening within our respective districts or CTCs. And one thing that we talked about was we all kind of collectively were seeing that our accounting numbers were not as strong as we've seen in the past. But we've seen interest in students coming through in a more broad business perspective. So what I learned about entrepreneurship as a program, I did realize that it was a program. We do have a neighboring district that runs it, but I didn't know much about it. And what I learned was that as a program, most programs in the state of Pennsylvania have a task grid. They're a certified program. You have to apply to be able to run it. And then it has an approved task grid that comes with it, basically a curriculum. Entrepreneurship is kind of this unicorn in the CTE world. It does not come with a task grid. You are able to create your own task grid, submit that to the state for approval. So you can, in essence, build a business education program under the banner of entrepreneurship and build it to what your students' needs, interests, skills, and career pathway desires fit. So as we looked more and more, and I have in the audience tonight, Mrs. Emery Seibert, Mr. O'Connor representing our business program, we've talked a lot about this. They're in full support of it. We would like to move forward with dropping the accounting program. And again, I don't look at it really as getting rid of a program, but rebranding into a new program, entrepreneurship, that will better represent all facets of business as a whole. And we believe attract even more students to take the program as a full-time program. So if we go to the next slide, Dwayne. Again, as I said before, it does not have a approved task grid. It allows us to create a more holistic approach. And another thing with this is currently, Mr. O'Connor is the only person that is certified through PDE to teach the accounting SIP code. If we go forward with an entrepreneurship SIP code, both Mr. O'Connor and Mrs. Emery Cyber, with their BCIT certification, are approved to teach that program. So it gives us even more flexibility in what we can do in terms of not only offerings, but also the kids that are able to be counted as full-time career and tech ed students under this business umbrella. So the next slide shows what I'd like to do as a timeline if the board is in agreement with this move. Again, this month, wanted to present to you this idea. Next month is what I would ideally like to see when a vote would happen for the curtailment or alteration and curtailment of the accounting program at the close of the 22-23 school year. Once we would get that approval that that program would be dropped at the end of the school year, we could then move forward with developing an occupational advisory committee for entrepreneurship, develop our task grid for entrepreneurship, and then also look at how we would have to adjust the 23-24 schedule to fit entrepreneurship. It wouldn't be much. Again, it's just kind of a rebranding. In March, we would then hold our initial advisory committee meeting with our new entrepreneurship group, which would include many of our current members in our accounting group. And then by April 2023, enter all the information for approval within the CAT system. I will say about the task grid, when we say it's kind of a blank canvas, it is. But through a lot of our connections and collaboration with local districts and CTCs that are either running the program or have other colleagues that are running the program, we have a collection of different task grids from around the state for the program that have already been approved through the state. So we have an idea of what the state is looking for, and it really does encompass a lot of what we already do. It's just a different packaging of it. So that timeline would easily allow us to start this program up in the fall of 2023. And what it would just require would be a vote in February to close that accounting program for the end of the year, the scholastic year 22-23. That is it in a nutshell. Does anybody have any questions?
Multiple.
Yes.
Okay.
First, as a student goes through this program and they go to college and want to be in the accounting world, will they have enough in high school to put them in a good position?
Yes. Yeah, I feel that it's going to, is it going to be as intense as the full accounting program? No, but is it still going to have many elements from that accounting task grid to provide a student a solid baseline if they want to go into that field? Yes. The idea will be that through this program, they will get enough training in all of those areas that will give them a good enough baseline that if they do want to go off into any of those fields, we will give them enough sound training, and kind of, better prepare them for any of those areas.
Have you spoken to the students about this?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. So we do a lot, I should say, all those courses that were listed up there that are currently taught for business education, that is in addition to the fact that the two teachers in the audience this evening, they teach every single freshman that comes through every single year a CAPS course, which is a career readiness course. So every single freshman gets that course with those two teachers in the audience this evening. And a big thing they do, not only in that course, but also in 8th grade as well, they go through kind of career aptitude programs to see what they are interested in. And we use that data to kind of selectively schedule students as they go into 9th and 10th grade to make sure that we're getting them into courses that are adhere to what their interests are for career pathways. We do not see a ton of kids coming out of 9th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade, saying that they're interested fully in accounting. Some, but do we see a lot that are interested in real estate? Are they interested in getting into the stock market, into finance, into marketing, into sales? Yes, we see a lot of those kids. So that's been a big part of the discussion with myself, Mr. O'Connor and Mrs. Emery-Seibert, that we feel like we are missing the boat on having a full CTE program that can encompass all of those things because the data is there. We are seeing kids coming through that are interested in those things. And maybe they're going to take accounting as a one-off, but they're not taking the full accounting program because that's not where their whole interest lies. But maybe if they dabble in accounting, they dabble in real estate, they dabble in sales, we believe it'll be a much more popular program. And seeing what those chosen career pathways are as they come through really backs that up. I also think that it will provide a lot more opportunities for them to get out into the field their senior year as well.
I have a curiosity question just on the nomenclature. How does this differ from what might have more traditionally been known as business administration or even management?
I don't think a lot, except that there are no SIP codes for those programs under PDE. I think we used to have administrative assistant was the other business program we had. And that doesn't really fit the bill of what we're talking about. Like I said, I didn't know really the background of entrepreneurship until this year. And so I started, looking into it, talking to some other administrators about it. And it really is kind of this, like I said, blank canvas that can cover all of those things. So it's, in our opinion, it's the best program that PD offers that is an approved career and tech ed program where we're going to get the subsidy for the students that are fully enrolled in that program. We're going to get the benefit through Perkins and through funding of having students in that program if it's under the umbrella of entrepreneurship and they're fully enrolled.
So basically, it's just pigeonholing us less. Basically.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
I also have a question.
Yes.
Maybe not so a question. Could we get maybe an outline or a syllabus or
Yeah.
whatever you want to call it now?
Yes.
What they call it nowadays.
I can jump that up in terms of the development of the task grid. Again, we've already looked at a couple sample ones and have an idea of how we want to adapt it to what we're doing. But I'm sure Mr. O'Connor, Mrs. Emery-Seibert, myself, we can get that to you prior to the February board meeting so you can see that.
Thank you.
Yep.
I'd like to add something just
Sure.
as someone who went through a business administration program in college, that it sounds like everything you name there is essentially the business administration program you would have in a college. But what it may help a student do is actually narrow down their focus for their degree. So their concentration may be able to be ironed out while still in high school, and they don't have to change it 4 times in college like some people do.
Yeah.
Until they land on what they really like. So I love that idea. I mean, if I was in high school and had that, would have been fantastic.
It's kind of similar, I think, it being a comprehensive high school and 99.9% of our career and tech ed students are our students. To have a more holistic program, I think is more beneficial, where, a bigger CTC that has, 40 some approved programs, maybe they can have more of those ones that are more, singularly focused. A good example is our construction trades program. Our construction trades program touches on electrical, masonry, plumbing, and everything under that. And a lot of times kids leave us going into specific areas of construction because they found their passion in going through those 3 years of construction trades. So I think this can fit that bill as well. And in addition, we would have to develop our own articulation agreements with at least one post-secondary institution. But I've already had several conversations with some of our PASHE schools, the New Commonwealth University, as well as Lackawanna College, Penn College. They're all open to developing articulation agreements for our students. If we would go forward with this program, students that would graduate would be able to leave here with credits under their belt at a number of institutions for, say, a business administration or business management type of program. So next step is to get in your hands a sample task grid so you can see that prior to a potential vote in February. Done deal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rance. The only other items we have are proposed agenda items, which are just our typical ones under Personnel Committee. I'm sorry, under Education and Technology, which is an approval for the course for Honors Chemistry 2. Any discussion on that? Hearing none, I think that's all. Mrs. Rice?
Before we adjourn, are there any comments from any board members? Welcome, Mr. Harris.
Thank you.
Your first official meeting. Appreciate you being here. There is a letter, I believe, Lindsay, sort of landed on
Yes,
your, yeah.
I don't have my
It's
folder.
yeah, a copy that we need to just make sure each board member, this has to do with the upcoming seats that are available. That Brenda probably sent the proper information in.
Yeah, but we can.
Yeah, I just want to make sure it's due.
I'll give it
I've
to her.
never seen this before, so I'm not familiar with that. Are there any questions from any board members? Brett, anything from you?
I just have a quick comment as we're looking in the future to reassign some of those reserve funds. I really think we need to take a close look at prioritizing our CTE program, making sure that we have industry standard, if not better, equipment for our students to be learning from or on. So I think that, I mean, we're known for that. We take great pride in our CTE program. This is a great opportunity to earmark some of those funds for that jewel of a program that we have.
Great. Anything else?
I just want to remind the board members that you all have the statement of financial interest in your packet. So if you could, please see that that gets filled out and returned to Ms. Zettinger. If not, she will hound me and then surely hound you. So thank you.
Right. From you, Dr. Picard. Okay. All right. Make a motion to adjourn the meeting. For a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor signify aye.
Aye.
See you next week. Thank you.